Good evening and welcome to Sonlight Conversations, What Makes a Great Education. My name is Judy and we are excited to have you join us for this installment of our conversation series. Now this evening we are hoping to focus on topics that concern homeschool parents as they plan for their children's education. You know, I remember wrestling with a lot of questions when we began our homeschool journey, and I would have so loved to have had the benefit of the wisdom and counsel of ladies like this evening's panelists. So speaking of our panelists, my co-host Luke
Hello.
and I would like to introduce you to these three wonderful ladies who have joined us today to have a conversation about the qualities that make up a great education. First off, Cathy Duffy has been reviewing curriculum for the homeschool community since 1984. Her latest book is 102 Top Picks for Homeschool Curriculum. As a curriculum specialist and author, Cathy began educating her three sons at home in 1982 and continued all the way through high school. Her curriculum reviews have long been a go-to resource for homeschoolers. And I remember poring over her book as I considered curriculum choices when I began homeschooling back in the mid-90s. So Cathy, what a privilege it is to have you join us this evening.
Oh, thanks, Judy. I'm so glad to be with you all tonight.
Next on our panel is Laura Lee Ellis. Laura Lee is a writer, a speaker, and a former missionary to Africa and a second-generation homeschooler. She's passionate about world missions and the potential of motherhood in shaping culture. She and her husband, Nick, and their three children have lived in 6 countries and recently returned to the States. If you frequent Sonlight's Facebook page, you will regularly see Laura Lee's encouraging thoughts shared there. Laura Lee, I'm so excited to have this opportunity to chat with you tonight.
I'm so excited to be here. This will be a great time to encourage one another.
And finally, a pioneer in homeschooling, Sarita Holzmann started Sonlight Curriculum to help missionaries stay on the field one more year. Her literature-based approach to homeschooling has proven to be a favorite for families all over the world. Now celebrating 25 years of Sonlight, the leading curriculum, Sarita looks forward to helping even more families raise lifelong learners in the next generation. She is happily married with 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Sarita, it's always a blessing to have the chance to work together.
And it's a huge privilege to share any good thoughts we might have with the people that are out there.
Thank you. So why don't we start off this evening by having you open us in prayer, please?
I'd be glad to. Lord Jesus, we're so grateful for the opportunity that we have to spend time even through the airwaves with so many moms around the world. Lord, I do pray that this evening would be a time of encouragement for every one of them. Lord, as we think through the important tasks that we have, we may be thoughtful in the work that we do. May we consider and evaluate and be wise in the choices that we make. Lord, may it be that we keep a correct focus. Give us gladness and joy in the important work you've given us to do, for homeschooling is a noble and significant and strategic calling. Bless each mom that's here, Lord, and may our words be wise, and may they be encouraging for each one that's here. And it's always in the matchless name of Jesus that we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Rita, for helping us to set our focus for this evening. So as we kick off our conversation this evening, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to hear some introductory thoughts from our panelists. It might help to just kind of lay the foundation for what our conversation is going to center on today. So Sarita, perhaps you could begin by sharing your thoughts on what makes a great education.
Judy, I'd be glad to give at least some initial thinking to this. I think it's a very important question, and it's something we probably as homeschoolers need to review often. I think, of course, we want to always be thinking about producing academically, using strong academics with our kids, because I think our ultimate goal has to be that we prepare our kids for whatever God has called them to do. I think we want to encourage our children in their walk with the Lord. I know that's something that's super important for me, and it's raising up kids that love the Lord is just critical and a big piece of my my desire for all of us. And I think we need to couple that with the idea that we want to raise up kids that have a focus and a challenge of thinking about God's heart for the world. I think it's not something that's normally communicated with homeschooled kids. I think it's something that is right and rings true with the things that God would like us to do. I think a good curriculum and a good time of homeschooling should build strong relationships one with another. I think we want to have our kids love one another, and we want to have moms that say, I'm so proud and I enjoy my kids. May it be that we build those relationships in a way that are strategic and good. I think we want to leave time for that creativity, which school can so often rob. Those massive hours just set away. Just don't allow our kids to function in the areas that are so what they're wired to do and to be creative. I think, too, we want to make sure we raise up kids that are able to think critically. In a world where so many topics come up that are, we're just told to just suck it up, but I want our kids to look at things and say, yes, this is true, this I disagree with, and to be able to reason out and come up with strong, strong thinking. I think our kids have to be able to communicate both verbally and well written in a world where the world is so tied by wires. Here we are even talking around the world. To be able to effectively communicate is a strong skill that we want to do. And I think we want our kids to read widely. If you have kids that love to read, there's no barriers in anything that they can learn or grow in their understanding. And ultimately, I think we want to ignite a love of learning in our kids. And if we can do that, boy, I think we have really succeeded in the things that we're called to do.
Thank you, Sarita. That's a great place to start, and I think that helps to really lay a good foundation for what we're going to be talking about this evening. Cathy, how about if you share some thoughts on what you believe makes a great education?
Well, I love everything Sarita said. I mean, she and I have shared so much common history and, going back to the same roots there, and when we started that, we could be parroting each other. I would add, though, that I see too many parents more concerned about getting through the curriculum, doing what other people expect them to do, and not allowing their children to have time to become who they need to become. And that means sometimes jumping out of the regular curriculum, whatever you've planned to do, and giving your children time to explore, to investigate, to experiment with things, to find out what it is that they're good at, what they enjoy, to find out what God is calling them to be by, being able to experiment without it being a big production, a subject area that's getting graded, something with an audience, but just to figure out who they are without a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of us have trouble relaxing and letting them do that sort of thing. And yet I think it's more and more important that society is kind of setting up, prescribing what we should do and how our children should learn and what they should learn. And I think we need to kind of step back from that and make sure that we give our children time to find out who they really are, what God is calling them to.
Thank you, Cathy. I think that very nicely adds to the foundation that Sarita laid. I think, though, that for a conversation to truly be a conversation, it has to be more than one-sided. And so we would like to invite those of you who are listening in this evening to participate as well. And it only seems appropriate at this point to turn back to our social media maven, Laura Lee, over here, to let our attendees know how they can join us in this evening's conversation. So Laura Lee, if you could give folks just a few brief instructions on how they can join the conversation, that would be great.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the next segment, we want to hear from you. So we know that you have lots of ideas and questions, and we want to have you to be part of this conversation. So we will actually have a social media topic that we'll introduce to all of you. And at the beginning of the segment, you'll find that on Facebook and Twitter. So if you go ahead and log into your social media, we're going to have the opportunity to hear your thoughts on the social media topic. And you will also have an opportunity by responding to these questions to even win some prizes throughout the evening. So not only do we have a great conversation, we can potentially walk away with some goodies, which is always makes for a good night. So please, when you see those social media questions appear, you will actually just respond in the comments underneath that question, and we'll be choosing winners from those responses. We'll also be taking your questions via social media, and our speakers will be addressing what you have, the questions that you've laid out.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura Lee. So Luke, my friend, here we are again.
Yes, we are.
Yes, it's an immense privilege to co-host with you on yet another Sonlight webinar, and I am looking forward to some really high-energy conversation this evening. But first, how about if we share any other important details that this evening requires for those who are participating?
Absolutely. And for those of you who are participating, again, we don't want you just to sit back and watch this amazing stream and learn from all that stuff. We want you to be involved as well. In fact, we're going to be asking questions and have those on the website, both on Facebook and on our Twitter account. And we want you to actually ask questions of the panelists in those media forms. So we're going to be throwing out a couple questions throughout this evening, and we want you to jump on either Facebook, go to facebook.com/Sonlight, and we will have the question posted there. And then underneath that question on Facebook, we want you to post your answer, and that answer is actually another question. So we will be asking a question such as, what is your favorite donut? Although that's not really a question here. But we'll be asking you that question, and then you will reply with your questions, which is, you know, what are the things that you have questions about for the panelists, and you'll answer that underneath the question on Facebook. Don't forget to include that hashtag Sonlight25. You can also do the same thing on Twitter, only we won't be able to post a question that you can then post to. So just ask your question based off the question that we're asking on Twitter, and don't forget to use that hashtag Sonlight25. That way we can find those questions, and then our panelists will be answering those questions as we go throughout this evening.
And by the way, a warm glazed Krispy Kreme donut is my favorite.
Okay, and then one more thing that I have to put in here, not about donuts, but actually about another prize, because as we go through this evening, we'll be choosing one person from Twitter and Facebook from each question who will be able to win a copy of Cathy Duffy's book in ebook format and also a summer readers package. And then in order to win the $250 Sonlight gift certificate at the end of this event, you need to have registered. So if you're on 25.sonlight.com, right underneath the video that's playing right now, there's this big old banner that says register for the Sonlight Conversations event. Open that in a new tab so that this video doesn't go away, and register for that event for your chance to win that $250 gift certificate at the end of tonight.
Thank you so much, Luke. And we will be reminding you of some of those details as we go through the evening. So if you've missed part of the instructions or didn't quite catch it all, don't worry. It'll be back around again. So let's jump right into the first segment of our conversation this evening. Our first topic of conversation is this. As you plan for your children's education, from preschool all the way through high school, what is your greatest concern that you would like to see addressed by our speakers?
And again, go to facebook.com/Sonlight, put your question underneath there, or twitter.com, and don't forget to include that hashtag Sonlight25. We want your questions for the panelists for this particular question.
Thank you. Again, as you plan for your children's education, from preschool all the way through high school, what is your greatest concern that you would like to see addressed by our speakers? And just in case you forget what the question is, you can see it on the live stream, and you'll also see it up on our Facebook page. So, you know, I totally remember wrestling with a variety of questions and fears when my husband and I made the decision to home educate our kids. And even as we moved further down the path of homeschooling and got 2 years under our belt or 5 years under our belt, there were still doubts that would arise about our ability to effectively educate our kids. So over the years, I've come to realize that, you know, I wasn't alone in experiencing those doubts. So we would like you to share your questions on Facebook and Twitter this evening so that you too can realize that you're not alone in sharing what's concerning you as you consider home educating your kids. So Cathy, our first question this evening comes from Jennifer, and she asks, as I plan for the upcoming school year, how do I make sure that there are no gaps in my children's foundational knowledge that will come back to bite us later on?
Okay, this is an interesting one. People ask this question all the time. It is a big concern. And you know, my first reaction to it is to turn it around and say, well, how much do you remember of what you learned in school? Because none of us remember everything that we were taught in school, and we all have gaps of one sort or another. So, just, get rid of the idea that there are going to be no gaps at all. But we do want to be concerned about building a strong foundation, primarily in math and the language arts. It's not that history and science aren't important, but children have to learn to read well to be able to learn history and science. And math is essential on a very practical level, we all know that, and math is also a prerequisite for any serious study of science. So math and language arts are your primary concern. When we homeschool, you can generally tell if there are gaps in these areas since you're working closely with your children, and you'll just spot them. I have to say, though, if you're using a computerized curriculum, it can be a different story. It's very easy to lose track, and your children can end up with some gaps if you're using computer curriculum and not staying on top of what they're doing. But if you're just starting out with homeschooling, your children are coming from another school, or maybe you're just switching from a different program, like a different math program, it's trickier. For math especially, you want to use placement tests. Those are available from many of the math program publishers themselves. They each have their own placement tests because the programs can vary from one to another and what they're teaching when. And I noticed on Sonlight that there's an excellent page there that has a guide with sites with placement tests for particular programs, for math, for reading, and for some reading readiness. So you might want to check that out. One area you might want to watch out for is math word problems. This can be a good clue. Sometimes your children will do a great job learning the math facts, but when they hit the math word problems, they start to really take a nosedive because they haven't really grasped the concepts of why they do math. Why do you add and subtract and multiply and divide? And sometimes that means taking a step backward to do a little more work in the applications and what this is all about. That's one of those gaps that can appear. The rest of language arts can be problematic. There are reading placement tests, but the broader language arts can be more challenging. Grammar problems are relatively easy to spot. Composition skills might not be so obvious. If you're not sure, you might just have your child write a sample paragraph for you or an essay if they're older. Give them a good prompt, something, give them a good idea to write about, and just see how well they do arranging that paragraph, constructing their sentences, and that'll tell you a lot. I know some parents want to know what other schools are teaching, and you can check out the Common Core standards, the Common Core State Standards Initiative, if you want to. More interestingly, on the Core Standards site, there is a page where you can easily find the standards for each state, and that includes beyond the Common Core standards for other subjects. A lot of homeschoolers like to just totally avoid the Common Core, and I don't blame them. And they still want to know maybe typically what's taught at each grade level. And so then you might go look at some of the different publishers because, again, they have their own scope and sequences where they are telling you what they are teaching at each grade level. And that's a good place to find out what is being taught in what sequence, and maybe use that as your guide to make sure you're not having gaps because of it. So I think that's probably enough on that topic. Maybe we go on to the next one.
Thank you very much. Ladies, have you got any other thoughts to add to what Cathy had to share? Or it was pretty thorough in answering Jennifer's question there. So I think probably we'll just move on. And by the way, some of those websites that Cathy mentioned, we're going to go ahead and throw those URLs up on our Facebook page. So in case you didn't catch the titles of them or perhaps where you might want to find them, we'll get those up there for you so that you have those clickable links. So let's move on, and we have another question from our attendees. Sarita, this question comes from BJ, and she states, what concerns me most is balance. How do I get my children to truly love learning, appreciate what is good, beautiful, and true while avoiding that whole learn, test, just get it on the transcript attitude?
Well, if you know me at all, you're going to really be able to predict what I'm going to say. But I would say if you read widely, you can avoid a lot of those traps. I think when you read, there's just so many benefits that you can gain from that. It's almost a painless form of learning, and it includes everything from vocabulary and comprehension and all those skills that are actually on our standardized tests. So if you read widely, you get the cultural literacy and all those benefits that come just as you spend time sitting together, reading books together, or having your children read on their own. Another way to keep a balance is to ask questions of your kids. Did you understand what happened? Talk about it. Bring up the issues that arise. It's a chance to learn how to communicate effectively, to find out where possible gaps might be in your children's understanding. And it allows you to clarify with your kids the things that are coming through. We want to see how much our kids know, and it also can solidify some of the things that we've been reading about. I think you can treasure those times when your children actually shine. One of our favorite sites at Sonlight is the Sonlight Moments, where moms write down the different things that their kids have done that are just really kind of outstanding. It's a good chance for us to see and remember how good our kids are doing as they are being trained in the home. And remind yourself of your goals. What is it that you want to accomplish? For me, my key goal was that I wanted my kids to love to learn. So as long as they weren't dragging their feet and were enthusiastic about the things they were learning and were listening intently and could remember what we were talking about, I felt like I had really accomplished what I wanted to do. And it could be that you set a goal like that for yourself, that you are clear in the things that you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Sarita. That is a wonderful response there to BJ's question. So let's move on to one other question from our listeners this evening. Rachel has posted and said, one concern I have is that my children will continue to love learning, which is what Sarita just addressed, but that they won't burn out in their academics. So Cathy, what might you share with Rachel as far as how to encourage her that with all the academics she's giving to her kids, that her kids not burn out?
So much of this goes back to what Sarita was saying about using literature and good books. I see children burning out when we use textbooks and workbooks, the workbooks particularly, doing page after page of exercises or problems. That seems to really produce burnout. And sometimes we tend to do too much with our children too, and especially again with textbooks and workbooks, trying to answer every problem, making them do everything in the book as if if they skip something, all would be lost. I think we parents have to make sure we're the ones in charge of the curriculum, that we're deciding what is useful, what's helpful, what is leading our child in the right direction. When we see our child just feeling overwhelmed, overloaded, we should stop. It doesn't matter if the chapter isn't finished, the lesson isn't finished. If they've reached that point, they're not learning anything anyways. And we should just stop, let it go. Maybe re-examine what we're doing. Maybe we need to talk less or read less or do something different. Maybe some more active learning. Depends on your child and what's going on. But a lot of it has to do with just getting away from the textbooks and the workbooks. Not that you shouldn't ever use those, but using them judiciously, making sure that we're not overloading our children. I say sometimes, when you're teaching your child something, leave them at a point, stop at a point where they're still enjoying it. If you reached a point and you're still going and they're not enjoying it anymore, then you're in trouble. You're going to be in trouble next day before you even start. So, realistically, children aren't going to enjoy everything they do in school, but try to keep a positive attitude going there.
I just want to agree with what you ladies have said. I know I was homeschooled all the way through K through 12, and I think your attitude is contagious with your children. You have an opportunity by having them at home with you to give them the gift of enthusiasm. And I think that's a real door opener rather than a wall builder in your life. And so when you are excited about what you're discovering with your children, they'll pick up on that. And maybe not at first, but I think when you model that you love to learn, when they see you asking those what if questions, or I wonder if we could find out that answer, and they see your enthusiasm for what you're reading and that you're continuing to learn as an adult, I think that model is really going to be contagious. And I don't think when I was homeschooled that we ever finished every chapter of every textbook or book that we were doing. And you sometimes wonder, well, how will things turn out? And they turned out fine. But I never will forget my mom, telling someone so excitedly about something that we were learning, or her waking us up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go see Halley's Comet wrapped in sleeping bags on a hill outside of our house. And I thought, she's an adult and she's so excited about learning something new. And I never forget that learning is not just for 12 or 13 years of your life, but it's who you are and it's a lifestyle. And I think when you communicate that to your kids, that will keep them going. And I totally agree with these other ladies about taking a break when you don't feel that happening.
Thank you. Boy, I couldn't think of any better responses. Thank you very much. So we have another question here from Sheena. Sheena asks, how do we know that our children are learning what they need to learn so they can achieve or be prepared for higher education? Cathy, do you have any thoughts to offer for Sheena?
Well, it depends. And I don't know, this seems like maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit too, because the college, and it's a whole nother thing to think about. When we're talking about college, we need to be thinking about what the college is going to be requesting, what are their requirements for students. So it's what's most important for the college entry, and you can find that out from any potential colleges you're interested in. And so it's, instead of thinking about high school graduation requirements, it's what's preparing. And if it's not college, it's what is my child going to do with their life. And I think a lot of homeschoolers are thinking entrepreneurially and thinking about other options rather than college. It's probably a good idea. So it's what's next, and how do we prepare our children for that, and then thinking backwards from that to what is needed. So it's kind of a different approach than we're used to. We're used to, just tell me what I have to do. Instead of thinking that way, I think we should be thinking, okay, what are we preparing them for? What's the rest of life? And it's life preparation, not just the education.
And I totally agree with that. But I think, too, we don't have to fear as we try to prepare our kids for high school. Because as we model education, as we model learning, I mentioned in the past that I didn't do very well in geometry when I took it as a student. I did much better in algebra. So then when Luke and I were working through his geometry book, there'd be times where I'd go, I don't have a clue how to do that. So we'd go to the answer key and we'd work backwards from that. And at the time you think, well, maybe that's a failure. But I don't think so. I think you're modeling how to conquer a problem that you don't necessarily know how to address. So as moms, we don't have to fear that we don't know every answer and we don't know every truth. What we need to have is that learner's heart, and as we model that for our kids, we're really setting them on the right path. So I don't think you have to fear any of those topics that are coming up. If it's something that's totally beyond you, find a mom that can actually do that, and you trade services with her. This is not impossible, and we can actually do this very effectively.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you all for doing just a great job of addressing the concerns and questions that these homeschooling parents have shared thus far this evening. So Luke, it's already time to take a break from our homeschool conversation and talk about prizes.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, I saw already on Twitter that someone already said that, they really loved your comment about the Krispy Kreme donut and how it's, right after her own heart as well. So I love that. And then also just seeing people's questions out there. There's just so many good questions about, I really love KJ's question out there about moving beyond the circle of the family, and just the opportunities that we have as homeschoolers have to reach out there and do things. But yes, it is time to move on to winners. So the first winners out there right now are Amber B, and Gina M. And Facebook was Amber B, and Twitter was Gina M. And congratulations, you guys are each going to get a summer reader package as well as an ebook copy of Cathy Duffy's book right there. And so that is really exciting. For those of you who are still waiting to win, we're going to have another question come up right after this. And if you want to get in on the drawing for the $250 Sonlight gift certificate, you need to go to 25.sonlight.com/register and register for this event. Even though we're already going, you can go register. Just open it in a new tab so that you don't stop this stream from happening, because this is awesome. And we're just really glad that you guys are here and that you're participating. And congratulations, Amber B and Gina M. That's just fantastic.
Thanks, Lou. What a great way to start off the evening. And you know, I'm just watching our Facebook page, and we just dropped a question up there. How old will you be when you finish homeschooling? That is a scary question to have to answer. So I'm just having fun watching people post all these different ages. So I think it'll be interesting to see what age all of our participants are going to be when they're finally finished with their homeschool journey. So let's keep the energy flowing here and move on into our next topic. So our next social media topic is this. Which subject do you find most difficult to choose curriculum for, and why?
And again, for those of you who want to ask, or I guess answer this question in the form of a question or with your own answer there, go to facebook.com/sonlight. Find that question that's posted there, post your question/answer underneath that with the hashtag Sonlight25, or on Twitter, go out there and answer that question with hashtag 25, and we'll be choosing 2 winners from this round, 1 from Facebook, 1 from Twitter. Okay, cool.
So, and again, if you don't remember what the question is, just take a look at the screen on the live stream and we will remind you of the question. And there is a little bit of a lag with Facebook, so give it just a minute for the question to load up on Facebook. I'll repeat the question for you. Which subject do you find most difficult to choose curriculum for, and why? And you know, I remember choosing curriculum can be a huge and daunting task. Cathy, Sarita, and I were all at a homeschool convention this last weekend in California, and that exhibit hall was just huge. And I talked to a number of moms and dads who admitted to me that they were just a bit overwhelmed by all that was available to them in that curriculum hall. And I think I saw more than one parent with that deer in the headlights look as they came by the Sonlight booth. So let's see what questions we have popping up on the subject of choosing curriculum. Sarita, our first question on this topic comes from Janice, and she asks, you know, I'm a good writer and always found it to be an easy subject when I was in school, but teaching my children how to write well is proving to be a very difficult task. So do you have some general tips for helping me to help my kids learn to write well?
Well, Sonlight follows the approach of Dr. Beachik, who was kind of a pioneer in the whole homeschool movement. And she was very big on using the writing of other well-known writers as models for writing. And I think that's a very effective tool to use if your kids are just, because kids don't have a lot of experience that, you know, you say, oh, write about your summer. Well, maybe they didn't have a very interesting summer, or they don't even know how to begin to unpack that. So what Dr. Beachik recommends is that you do like Ben Franklin did, who would look at an article, he would close the book and then try to rewrite it himself. He got to the point eventually where he said, actually, I liked my own copy better than that. Another thing you can do is to use a variety of writing methods. One of the things I did with my own kids was we had a journal going where I'd write something and they would write back to me, or they'd write me notes, or that whole back and forth gives kids a chance to actually write in a way that's significant and important. Do it the whole variety of writing styles. Do some poetry. Do some, just do a variety of things. Do a report. Try different ways of writing. Gives your children a chance to try their hand at different kinds of things. And I think, too, we want to model how to write. I'm big on, as moms, we can actually work with our children. There was one point where Justin had to write a paper, and it was just loaded with being verbs. So I went and I circled them, and I want you to try and come up with a true verb on this. And he got all kinds of accolades on the particular paper and was actually proud of that, but it was working with him and helping him work through it in a way that was actually helpful, in a way that isn't critical as well.
Thank you. That's some great, really practical ways of teaching our kids how to write well. Excellent thoughts. Cathy, here's another great question, and this one comes from Lydia. She says, I've heard homeschoolers say that math is the most difficult subject to teach your children. I did not do well with math myself in high school, and I'm afraid my children will not be able to learn from me. How do you teach a subject that you don't know or understand, whether it's math or otherwise?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think that's a fear that a lot of us parents have, because well, I shouldn't say none, but few of us did well in every subject, and we're trying to teach our children all of these things, quite a challenge. Anyways, I think, first of all, we have to understand that we do learn or relearn right along with our children. We're often thinking ahead to, oh, how am I going to teach algebra when we're trying to get through first and second grade? And as we go through these years of teaching our children and working with them, we are often building a new foundation in math for ourselves, one that maybe we didn't have. So sometimes we're just learning right along with our children. But there are sometimes subjects that just elude us, or we just don't want to teach, they just are. And so we do, it's amazing, we have wonderful options now with, there are videos with, video teachers that you can access from DVDs or online. For math, especially, I think there are more choices for math than any of the other subjects. In fact, I think if I see another online live math or video math course, I'm just going to choke. There's so many of them now. But there are also group classes. If your child does better working with or under someone else or with a group, there are live online group classes where students get together online and work through a subject together, meeting like once a week online and then doing work in between. There are online courses where students can work at their own pace. There are group classes formed by support groups. So in your area, you'll find a number of families getting together, maybe to do science in the lab experiences together, maybe studying a foreign language with someone so they can practice actually speaking the language. It sounds outlandish, but you can even hire tutors, because when you're homeschooling, you generally don't need to hire a tutor to come in and be there for hours with your child. Your child can probably work with a tutor maybe for an hour once a week, and then do other work in between, and then save up their questions till they meet with a tutor. And that can be very affordable. And I think I heard Sarita mention earlier the idea of trading talents. This is one we did a lot. Just comparing notes with other parents of what they like to teach and what's going on with your different children, and trading talents. We had, we kind of gathered with a few other families informally. I liked to teach writing classes and critical thinking classes and that sort of thing. And other moms like to teach the younger children, so we just kind of split them up, and we'd have small groups of 4 or 5 children for classes. And it didn't cost anything. So there's all kinds of options now to make this possible for everybody. There are, self-teaching courses all over the place. So nobody should be concerned about trying to teach a subject they don't know or don't like.
Thanks, Cathy. That's great.
I'd like to add to that, because I think you're just dead on, and it's just really profound and very, very good information. I'd like to add, though, if your child is having trouble understanding math, please do bring out math manipulatives. And they don't have to be anything fancy. They could just be navy beans glued onto a popsicle stick to show place value of 1 to 10. But sometimes just those abstract figures just don't have any meaning for kids, because they aren't something that's in the real world. So just pull out things to demonstrate what you're doing, and a lot of times that can help unpack what's happening in that arena.
Yes, I agree.
I'll just add quickly as well, for the high school subjects, one thing I greatly appreciated with my science in high school was that I had an opportunity to do dual credit at a local community college. And so, my mom was teaching 4 kids. That was one subject that she wasn't having to do. I could go home and teach the rest of the family what I was learning, and I got credit, college credit, while I was doing it. And that was a big confidence booster as well for those college classes, that I had that under my belt. I could take a lighter load my freshman year. It was much cheaper. So there's a lot of advantages to even doing some classes that way.
Excellent. Very good point. Thank you. So here's another great question from our listeners. Danya asked this question: math or science or any subject, all these curriculums promise me that my child will have the math way of thinking or the science way of thinking. As a fledgling homeschool mom, how do I find the best curriculum without trying them all? And can I even try them all? What do you think, Cathy?
I think that's what I've been concerned about for so many years, because yes, now we've got many thousands of options out there, and every one of them claims to be the latest, greatest, and this will do magical things with your children. Some of them are great, some of them are not. That's just the way it is. So I try to write, that's really what I'm doing on my website. I'm trying to write objective reviews about the different resources and where they're strong, where they're weak, how they work. And then I've narrowed down to what I think are the top products in the market in my book, the 102 top picks, so that parents, especially when you're brand new to homeschooling, you're not having to look at the entire universe of products out there, but you can, confidently try, something that is likely to work for you. So, yeah, they're not all going to be accomplishing what you want, no matter what they're saying. You need some objective opinions to help you sort that out. And I think some of the homeschool forums are very valuable for that too. Moms have so much expertise, and they will generously share their opinions on different curricula, and that's so helpful.
And I sometimes think that maybe my mom did try every curriculum on the market, and it's okay. But I think, one thing I would say, as I'm just entering this homeschooling journey, I'm thinking, what curriculum works with you? If you are happy teaching it, if you're comfortable teaching it, if your kids are enjoying themselves, maybe don't sweat it. That's the key. Is what they're going to remember at the end of their time is not which particular book they were doing, but they're going to remember you and the memories that you make. They're going to remember if you took time to listen to them, if you had a smile on your face and you were enjoying your time. But I think, on this side of things, that's what comes to my mind when I think back through the 13 years. That truly, I believe, of course, that Sonlight is the best of the best, but it's the memories with you, with your family, that I think are going to stick with your kids the most, and that involvement that's going to make the biggest difference with them, both academically and socially and relationally, and all those other aspects of being well prepared for life.
Yeah,
great.
Laura Lee, I think that is so important too, and I'm thinking of some of the great books that we read aloud together, even when our boys were high schoolers, that we would still read some great books aloud together, and sharing that experience probably was far, far more important than whatever curriculum was in the background.
Very good. Excellent point. I think we may have time for one more question from our listeners on this topic before we move on to our next break. So here's one that I've heard a lot of homeschool moms ask. Jessie says, there are so many different approaches to teaching subjects like math and science and writing. How do you decide which is best for different ages and different learning styles?
Oh, right up my alley too, of course.
Yes.
Yes, I've spent years talking about learning styles and really trying to understand. The goal here is with learning styles, it's not to identify our children, but it's to figure out how they learn most easily, so that when you're trying to teach them a new concept or new skill, that you're teaching them in the way they learn most easily. Some children will learn really, really easily if you're just reading something aloud to them, while others like those manipulatives, or they like to be doing hands-on something or other, or moving their body around. And we all have different styles. There's so many different ways of approaching the various subjects. Some children will learn science just reading from that textbook, while others need to have the experiment first that raises the question, that makes them just have that sense of wonder. I wonder why that works. And then they could go read the textbook and make sense of it. But again, it's a learning style issue that we need to think about. And so that is something we need to pay attention to when we're choosing curriculum. And again, I try to address those kind of aspects when I'm doing reviews, because I do think this is a very important point.
Thanks, Cathy. That's excellent. Ladies, I can't tell you how practical I think your suggestions are this evening for this staggering task of choosing curriculum for our students. So thank you for being willing to share some really great ideas. Luke, it's our turn once again.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Okay, and before we go on to who won, I do have to make a couple reminders out here. One is on Facebook, if you're wanting to make certain that you're at the top of the list of everything that's going on right now, don't forget to refresh your Facebook page. Don't refresh this page, the one that the video's on, because, yeah, we don't want you to lose that. But refresh that Facebook page to get that the latest content there. And then also, somebody asked me, I realized that I didn't say this last time, if you are one of the winners, we will be reaching out to you. On Facebook, we will be private messaging you from a personal account. We can't private message you from the company account because they don't let companies private message people, with good reason. So we won't be doing that. It'll be somebody from Sonlight who will say, hey, you were a winner, and then we'll link up with you to get the information that we need to send you the stuff to get you your winnings. And then same with Twitter, we're going to be reaching out to you, getting your contact information so that we can make certain that we get you the things to win. So speaking of winners, let's get the winners from the last round, and those are Wendy O and Nikki W. So Wendy and Nikki, Wendy from Facebook, Nikki from Twitter, you guys each won a digital copy of Cathy Duffy's book as well as a summer reader package. So congratulations. I'm very grateful that you guys are here. And for those of you who are still participating and still waiting to win something, we've got another chance for that coming up here with our next question. We'll be posting that to Facebook. It'll also, you can answer it on Twitter as well. Just make certain that you answer that question that's posted, and then also use that hashtag Sonlight25 so that we can make certain that you are in that running, so we can see your answer out there on the web out there. It's awesome. So we're so grateful that you guys are here. And for those of you who want to have an opportunity to win that $250 Sonlight gift certificate at the end of this event, we want to make certain that you guys are registered. So on the 25.sonlight.com/register, fill in some information there, and then you can be entered into the drawing to potentially win that awesome gift certificate. So.
And you know, Luke, I'm not as Facebook savvy as you are, but I think when we reach out to connect with those folks, they're going to need to check their other folder in Facebook so that they can see the message from us. So make sure if we announced your name as one of the winners, that when you check your Facebook account later, you look in that other folder. And you know, Luke, I'm having so much fun here because we dropped the question up on Facebook, do you have enough bookshelves? And some of the answers that I'm seeing here are just phenomenal. Amber posted no. And I keep dreaming about making all my kids share one room forever and using the other bedroom for a library. So
I think I saw several references to IKEA because, yeah, Colorado got one of those recently. So we're really grateful that we can go there and get bookshelves.
Well, that's just fun. So make sure you check that little conversation going on there about bookshelves, and feel free to add your own feelings about whether or not you have enough bookshelves in your homes. And perhaps, ladies, you might want to point your husbands toward that conversation as well. Okay, it's time to move on to our next topic for the evening as we roll along here. This topic is thinking ahead. As you think ahead to your child's graduation, what is your greatest fear about their future? Thinking ahead to your child's graduation, what is your greatest fear about their future? And in just a moment, that question will pop up in Facebook, and you'll be able to respond there. And also, you can see the question up on our live feed, so if you have forgotten what the question is as you go along, you can check there. You know, I remember, ladies, that there were many, many days as we homeschooled over the years that I really doubted that we would ever get to the end of our homeschool journey. And then suddenly, my oldest was ready to start high school, and I had these never-ending visions of transcripts and graduation and college trips just floating through my mind constantly. So as you all are listening and participating, please head on over to Facebook and Twitter and share your concerns or questions on this topic. And Cathy, we have our first question from Debbie. Debbie shares, college seems like a huge and very expensive step to take. So I want to do as much as possible to prepare my student academically. What are the most important don't miss them courses to be sure that my student completes before we get to graduation?
Well, this is interesting. This is, in a way, similar to the earlier question about college, because we do have to be concerned about what the college entry requirements are. But beyond that, there are quite a few things we should be thinking about. Our students need to have the study and organizational skills so they can work efficiently on their own. They need to be self-disciplined, you know, because no one's going to be looking over their shoulder and reminding them they have to do their homework and turn it in when they go to college. And while, you know, there are required courses for college, and that's pretty obvious. You can see that. I think there are some subject areas that aren't required that I would think are very essential. I would put critical thinking or logic at the top of that list. I think our children, teens especially, need to learn how to think, how to spot truth, how to spot falsehood, how to think beyond the surface, how to defend their ideas with logical arguments. And that's probably really closely connected to another area I would put right up there at the top. I think teens should have developed a deep understanding of what it means to have a Christian worldview before they go to college. That means they need to understand how their Christian faith is connected to all areas of life, that it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. They need to learn how their faith is connected, for example, to science, history, philosophy, economics, law, sociology, and the arts. And critical thinking, of course, is very much required for that type of study. I know that sounds intimidating, but there are so many courses out there, including some of Sonlight's high school courses that help teach worldview. A lot of them are more like unit studies, and they include your core subject areas, and then they bring in the economics and philosophy and how all of this connects up. It's kind of the so what? Why are we learning all of this stuff? We ask those questions from a Christian worldview, and that's, to me, what's very, very essential to have a child truly educated before they go on to college. Now, you can study worldview as an elective if you're not getting into a worldview or a program that already has that built into it. You can find courses and even do this on your own, but there are worldview courses that stand off on their own too. But either way, however you do it, I would think that that type of thing is the don't miss type of course students should complete before they graduate from high school and go on to college or to life.
I totally agree. But on a less intense kind of a listing, my husband would say every student should study typing.
Yes. But now they need to have typing in elementary school because they're doing some keyboard. It's not, you know, I don't think of that as high school anymore. It used to be, we thought high school, but need
and
to
I
do
would
that
also
earlier.
say you should probably do some electives with your children. And I say that because one of my children actually went to art school, and I did not know she was artistic until we did some elective art. So sometimes it's just doing some of those optional kinds of things that can actually guide your children in the direction they should go.
Yeah.
I just want to encourage you homeschool moms as well that I know when I graduated from college, it was senior year, and I was on the homecoming court, and I was standing there with my dad thinking back over time in college and what had been significant, you know, how my high school had prepared me. And there are so many benefits, I believe, just innate to home education that will be a benefit to your children for college. And Cathy mentioned that independent study, the ability to self-teach. I think most homeschool high school students have already begun to develop those abilities. And that was huge for me in being able to read and comprehend on my own. I had already been responsible for a lot of my learning. And that was sometimes the first time for some of my friends to ever have that experience, but that was something that was already there. The other thing that I just would encourage you with is that your child will probably already have a sense that they can relate to you as a mentor. And that was a huge asset for me in college, was to see professors as mentors, people that I wanted to welcome knowledge from, versus the enemy, someone who I just had to fear and be afraid of. And that helped me to get internships and great relationships and continue. I have lifelong mentors as professors because of that preparation. And so I think your children, are just set up so well for college when you're giving them a home education. So I just want to encourage you parents out there that beyond getting that transcript ready, that there's so many things that are just innate to what you're doing that will put your children in good stead. Even the socialization aspect, even just learning to relate to people of different ages, that will help them while they're in college. So just wanted to help you guys remember that what you're doing, even those simple things, are helping them to get ready, even if they're not on the transcript.
Good point. Good points, all three ladies. Thank you so much. Moving on, we have another question from one of our listeners. Sarita, Barb asks a question that I expect many homeschool parents ponder and pray about during those high school years. Barb says, I read so much about kids wandering away from their faith in college. How can I be proactive while my children are still at home to ensure that their convictions remain in place once they leave home?
Well, I just really love this question because I think as homeschooling parents, we have an absolute unique opportunity to invest in our lives in this very critical way. I think when they're gone 8 hours a day, it's much harder to really develop this whole idea of the faith and the example that we can present for our children. I always want to remember that Dr. Dobson's comment where he talked about how there's no guarantees that our children will walk in the faith. Just as we can't take credit if our children choose to walk with the Lord, we can't take blame if they choose in their own way to go their own way without the Lord for a season. But I think as homeschooling parents, we have a chance to model our faith as we pray with our kids. We can pray together, encourage them to pray, for example, for unreached peoples and the things that are on the heart of God. We can read the Bible together, and I would recommend that that would be the model that we choose. Because, of course, the Word of God is just living and active and can so speak to our lives just as we read it together. And then discuss it and speak about the things that you're learning as you're gleaning things from the Word. Testify to the things God's doing. And always we do want to pray for our children, recognizing that the enemy, of course, is totally coming against them, and God's power is greater.
Excellent. Other ladies on the panel, do you have anything you'd like to share in addition?
I think it's, so much of that is the modeling. Whatever's going on in the home is so critical. We can't be hypocrites. It is so much what our children see us, how we live out our faith. That's just so essential.
Yeah.
I read a book this year called Almost Christian by Christy Dean, and she looked at the national study on youth and religion, and I think there was maybe 8% of students who are in college who are actually, actively involved in their spiritual lives. It was just ridiculous statistics about how many people go away. And through some surveys and studies with these students, they said, well, what are the commonalities of those students who are firm in their faith and who are actively involved, in their churches? And a couple interesting things stuck out to me, and one was that modeling in the home that both of you ladies mentioned, that one of the things that made a difference was not the big youth group and not so many things that you might think, but that they had a parent who they could see in the home living out faith. And what a great challenge to us as parents to live what we are teaching our children. And the other thing was they have a sense of mission and purpose. Personally, a mission that, and exactly, I think Cathy talked at the beginning about who has God made your child to be, and I think when you speak that into their lives, it helps them to say, this isn't just your mom and dad's faith, this isn't just something your family does, but God has a purpose and a mission for you. That's inspiring, and kids want to follow the Lord in their own personal relationship and follow that call that He has for them. So I think those things, mission and purpose and modeling, are so huge. And also that they understand the true gospel, not just man-made tradition, but they truly understand what grace means, and that at any point that we can run to him, those very basic tenets of the gospel, that we're speaking those into our kids' lives and not just kind of assuming that they get the faith because it's sort of what we do, but that we're just making that a part of our daily lives and conversations.
Thank you for that perspective. That was excellent.
I think that is so important too. I think, you know, we just can't emphasize it enough, because if we educate our children academically only, they get into Harvard or Yale or whatever and have all the academic accolades, and they've walked away from God. What have we accomplished? And we, you know, we really just need to get our heads screwed on right about this from the beginning. It's so important.
And I'm going to jump in here too, even though I'm not a panelist here. But one of the things that I really like is the global perspective that we have the opportunity to instill in our children. And for me, growing up, seeing how God works in and through so many different people in so many different cultures through the missionary biographies was probably one of the most faith-building elements of my growing up years, and it also helped develop my theology to see that there is more and to experience grace and to keep my mind open to learning from other traditions within Christianity and to see that grace working in different ways. So for me, that was deeply foundational to my faith and really transformed my life and really kept me strong, not only through high school, but then also through college and into my life now when I talk to kids who are now dealing with these kinds of questions. But seeing that grace and seeing what God does in and through people throughout history was really impacting in my life.
Thanks, Luke. That's just an excellent perspective. We have another question here from Holly Beth, who shares that her greatest fear is that her kids will look back on their homeschool education and regret not having a traditional school experience. And, you know, I've heard this from many parents who are concerned that their kids will look back and feel that they've been cheated or they have missed something by being homeschooled. It's a tough question. Cathy, do you have any thoughts as to how to maybe encourage Holly Beth in this particular concern?
Well, yeah, I think it was very much a concern for those of us who started homeschooling back in the 80s, because, you know, our children were worried about being oddballs and what were they going to miss out. We didn't have the history, these years of homeschooling graduates and seeing how they functioned in life, and it was a real concern. Now, not so much so, because that regular school experience is turning out to be not so pleasant more often than not, and harmful often in so many ways. Sometimes, though, I see parents wanting their children, maybe it's wanting to live vicariously through their children, wanting them to be able to go to homecoming and to be on the football team and that sort of thing that, you know, they experienced. That was the high point of their high school experience. But oftentimes those high points, you know, there's just a flicker in the whole span of the high school experience, and it's what you have to take with it to get that. That makes it not really, you know, all that worthwhile a trade-off. You know, and I think in the end it's just like the rest of life. You make choices. Nobody gets to do everything. So, you know, you're choosing one form of education rather than another. Yet I think the homeschool world has matured to such a point that we have substitutes for many of those experiences, and we also now have more. We've always had many more experiences than traditional school students can do. We have much more time for field trips. We have time to do internships and apprenticeships and a lot of those other things in the upper high school years that traditional school students can't do. So I find more and more, I think, you know, the benefits are much more on the homeschooling end of the spectrum now, where we used to worry that our children were missing out. I think now the traditional school students are missing out much more than we are. So yeah, I don't see that as a problem anymore at all. You know, yes, there might be one or two things you don't get to do, but so many other things you do get to do.
Excellent. I think that's a great point, Cathy. I have another question here that popped up that just really struck me as I was reading through it, and I'm hoping that you ladies will weigh in on this. I think I know what some of you might share. Jenny says, my greatest fear is that I haven't prepared them to succeed in life professionally and personally. One of the scariest things about homeschooling is that it all rests on my shoulders. So ladies, what would you say to encourage Jenny in her concern about all of the responsibility of homeschooling resting on her shoulders?
Does anybody else want to jump in? I will, but I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. I think sometimes we take too much on ourselves, that we are not responsible for everything in their lives. Yet, I do think we should be giving our children plenty of opportunities to explore and try those real life opportunities to do, you know, like internships, things that I mentioned, jobs, part-time jobs when they're in high school. I think volunteering is a great way to get started if they're not old enough for jobs, but volunteering, because they learn how to be responsible. I mean, that can be as simple as going in and helping with a younger children's Sunday school class. We had our boys doing that when they were in the elementary grades. They would help with younger ones. There are so many different ways to volunteer and really learn adult level skills. And those, I think, prepare our children for real life, for the work world and everything else, as well as anything else. But then as they get older, you know, making it more professional, more real gradually. I think that's the way it works best. So that, you know, we're not keeping them in a cocoon when they're going through high school, but they're really having chances to reach out into the world. Now, I do think that a lot of children in traditional schools miss out on a lot of those opportunities that we are able to give our children. Here's another one of those advantages: chances to learn to interact in the real world, to be with adults, and to learn how to handle responsibility. So again, I think, yes, it's something to think about and be purposeful, but not a problem. There are plenty of opportunities to deal with it.
I totally agree. And I think if we have the mindset as teachers that we will totally prepare our children with everything they need to know, that's a fallacy. I agree with you, Kat. You're just putting way too much bondage on yourself. I think if we can raise up kids that love to learn, that think reading is a pleasure, that think, like Laura Lee mentioned, that adults are not scary. There's just so many advantages we can give our kids that aren't actually part of the curriculum. But it's one of those things, like you said, let them do all the activities that kids who are homeschooled have time to do. If we can work on their character issues, wow, that's a huge opportunity that we have as parents. We want to work on their character anyway, and it's so much harder to do when they're in school for 8 hours. You know, if we can work on them to be polite and to work hard and to have a right attitude, boy, that's half of what an employer is actually looking for.
Yes, it's rare these days, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So if we can just give our kids that sense that life is interesting and I'm not done learning. Luke had a friend, you know, when he finished high school, he said, I am never reading another book. Well,
oh, no.
That boy isn't going to go anywhere. You know, it's one of those where if you, go ahead.
That's a failed education.
Totally failed education. But if we can have kids that say, I'm going to learn the rest of my life, what barrier is there for them in any point in time?
And honestly, I've written about, man, I just jumping in here. I'm
You
not a
are.
panelist. What's going on here? This is crazy. Okay. I've written a couple blog posts on the Sonlight blog about gaps in education, and the reality is you will always have more opportunities to learn stuff. In one of the blog posts, I talk about how I remember when, I don't remember exactly what age I was, when I discovered that reindeer were real. And it was because reindeer, up until that point in time, had been just, you know, things that pull Santa's flying sleigh, so obviously they aren't real. And then I see a picture with an Eskimo, and I was like, wait a minute, what? There's reindeer? And like my mind was blown. And it's because there are always more opportunities for learning things. You can't possibly get all the knowledge in this world downloaded into your brain. And honestly, why would you want to? It's the joy of learning how to do things and getting that information. So gaps in knowledge, they're going to be out there, and we have the opportunity to learn and find that joy and that spark in discovering that stuff as we go through life.
Excellent.
I think something about that question that really resonated with me was that she said, it's all on me. And you think about, it's all on somebody. Who, instead of just thinking about, I am my sole child's teacher, it's like you are launching them into this gateway of learning, and you are the one who's opening this world for them. And who better to do that? You love them more than anyone. You know them more than anyone. And you don't have to do it all yourself, but you can open up those opportunities for them. You can introduce them to people. You can give them these wonderful opportunities. But if you think about the other side, what if it's all on someone else? And you don't have that time to help them become prepared personally and professionally. So that's such a gift that you have the time together. And I remember accompanying my dad to the nursing home when he would preach, and I would get to listen to all these stories from World War II veterans and just a generation of wisdom. Or, you know, getting to start my business when I was 15 years old, or job shadow all of these people at a university for jobs that I was interested in. And I did it all during school hours. And there are things that I never would have had the time to pursue. And I think sometimes for homeschoolers, we have to encourage moms, well, maybe you should stay home a little more. Maybe it's the other end of the spectrum that, you know, homeschoolers have so many opportunities to be out and involved in doing things and learning things that, you know, maybe sometimes the advice we need is just to chill out a little bit.
Yeah.
And you know, Sarita, I've heard you say a number of times that anytime we do something for the kingdom of God, there will be resistance. And I think this lie that homeschool moms tend to believe that they're carrying this job all on by themselves is just that. It's a lie. And I think we need to resist that lie and understand that, as these ladies have described, there are many opportunities for people to impact your children and to help them to learn and to grow. And so I think those are just excellent points.
Yeah, I have one other, let me throw in one more
Sure.
point on this too, because I think it's very important to just our perspective on this. If we truly believe that God loves our children more than we do, and we are pursuing His purposes for our children, do we not trust that God is going to help us through this project? I saw it over and over again, and I think most of you will attest to that too.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. And I think those of us who are on the other end of the homeschool journey can look back and say that with just absolute conviction. Thank you for reminding us of that, Cathy. One last question before we wrap up this segment, and this comes from Anne. And I love this question, and Laura Lee, I think this would be a perfect question to toss your way, because I think your recent experience probably can speak to this. My kids love their literature-based education, so I'm concerned about the switch that they're going to have to make to textbook learning when they get into college. So based on your college experience, was that an issue for you?
You know, I think one of the key preparations for higher education, for life, is to be able to read something, to, you know, think critically about it, to ask questions, to discuss it. Those are skills that you will get not from a textbook. And I believe that the skills that your students' professors will want them to have in college to prepare a debate or to have a class discussion, you know, a literature-based education is brilliant for that. I think it will be, honestly, anybody can get used to the process of reading a paragraph, memorizing a date. I think your students will be able to handle that just fine. But I think the preparation of, you know, helping them to just engage critically and just discuss the literature that you're doing every day, that's just going to be a boon to them. The other thing that I will say, the literature that I read as a child with my parents. You know, I don't know Laura Ingalls Wilder or Corrie ten Boom, but they're mentors for me.
Sure.
You know, they influence the way I think. They influence the way I feel that I act toward other people. You know, when I think about what does it mean to persevere or to be willing to sacrifice for what's right, you know, it was literature that inspired me, literature that I read with my parents that inspired me to reach for what's beautiful and good and true. And those kinds of influences are going to come out in college in your students' writing, in their ability to express themselves, in the goals they're setting for the future. It's preparing them for life and adulthood, and the college is just a step in the journey, and they'll do great in college, but I don't think you have to worry too much about the textbooks. They make a great paperweight no matter where you are in school, right?
And as someone who has gone from homeschool to both high school and then on to college, the transition honestly was not difficult. In fact, the hardest part was discovering that there were bad books in the world, like books that just were boring to read. Because growing up using Sonlight, I just loved everything that I read, and then I got to high school, and they were like, "Here is great literature," and I was like, "This is not great literature. What are you talking about?" But as far as doing well, it's learning how to learn on your own. The homeschool model really prepares for that kind of stuff, and you know, you learn how to do what you need to do to get your stuff done, and that works no matter you know, whether you're reading books or textbooks, or if you really don't like the academic textbook side of things, do what I did and be a film major. You know, that works too.
And yes, Lillian, who asked in response to Luke's statement that reindeers are real, yes, this is Luke the Science Guy from the DVDs that our Sonlight puts out. So
there is stuff to learn.
There is stuff to learn.
Even when you make DVDs for fun. Yeah, that's an option.
Absolutely. Well, excellent thoughts from all of you this evening. And you know, I think I could sit here for another hour or two and not come close to listening to you ladies address all the thoughts and topics that our listeners raised this evening. But our time is drawing to a close, and I want to make sure that we give our panel members one last opportunity to kind of wrap up their thoughts on what makes a great education, and to just briefly share those thoughts with our audience before we call our conversation closed. So Cathy, how about if you start off by sharing your parting thoughts to the homeschooling parents who joined us this evening, and then we'll move on and have the other ladies do the same.
Yeah, I think a story with my oldest son from when he was young might, you know, it just kind of illustrates a lot of what we were talking about tonight. My oldest son, Chris, from the time he was about 7 years old, he was interested in archery. I don't know, Robin Hood or whatever got him interested. My husband, we didn't have anything to do with archery, knew nothing about it. But Chris went to the library and started reading every book in the library over and over. He'd check those books out over and over again. Started carving his own bows and arrows. And as he got into Boy Scouts, he you know, took the merit badges for doing archery and did, you know, archery every opportunity he got at Boy Scout events. And he pursued that on his own. He taught himself all about archery. Got the archery merit badge, of course, and then later got credentialed as an archery instructor and taught other people how to do archery, participated in contests. But it was something he did entirely on his own from the point, you know, and from an early age. And through that experience, and he, you know, academic, he's not a real you know, strong academic. He's more of what I call my Wiggly Willy, the child who wanted to, you know, build forts and climb trees. But he learned that he could learn something. He learned the tools of learning on his own. And I think that is one of the most important lessons that our children can get over the years, is just to learn that they can teach themselves. They're not dependent on somebody else feeding them information. They don't have to go take a class to learn something. So to me, you know, that's one of the most fundamental concepts, and it probably ties into with something else that I want to emphasize, that we shouldn't take too much credit or too much blame for how our children are coming out. Now, Sarita was talking about this in, you know, spiritual realm, but I think in regard to other things, because our children are going to learn all kinds of things that we don't teach them. Like Luke discovered about reindeers, that they're real, looking at a picture. I don't think that was a planned lesson, probably, unless I'm mistaken. But there are all kinds of things that they learn in spite of us, or, that we just don't know about, especially if they're just reading lots of books. We can't possibly keep up with everything they're reading. So they're going to know a lot of things we didn't teach them. And on the other hand, there are going to be things that we know we have taught them over and over again. And somebody else is going to ask them about that, and they're going to just look blank, like they never, ever, ever heard of it, just on purpose to embarrass you. You know that's going to happen. So, in the end, we can't take too much credit or too much blame for the whole education process, because so much of it is in the mind of our children, what they choose to learn and to hang on to, and not so much what we try to put into their brains. And so that's something we need to really get a handle on. And then I think my last comment would be that we really need to try to make sure there are fun moments in our educational day, even if they're not very, important academically, maybe very minimally connected in an academic sense, but things that are fun, so that our children do see that there's joy in learning, joy in those life experiences that have to do with getting information and learning things. So I think that's probably enough. I could probably go on that topic for a long time. So.
Well, thank you, Cathy. I truly appreciate those thoughts. Laura Lee, how about if you share with us some final thoughts on what makes a great education?
I can't help but think of the verse from Luke 6:40 that says, "A student, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher." And that's such a conviction for me right now that my children are watching. It's both exciting and terrifying to me as a young parent. But what an opportunity that we get to just live life with our children. And I think that's my prayer, is that a good education for them will be me modeling a life well lived. And I can't do that on my own. None of us can do that. We're all depending on God. And so what my hope is that I model that for them, that they run to Jesus, that they learn that they also are not perfect, but that we have someone that we can go to. I think that I want to give them that perspective that I know Cathy and Sarita have talked about all the way through, of that world view, that they have a lens with which to view the world. We can't fit in all the knowledge they're going to need in the first 18 years of their lives, but, if they can be asking the right questions about who am I, why am I here, what is the meaning of life, if they're asking those questions from a perspective of truth, that's going to give them such a great preparation for learning lifelong. And I also think, just especially at this stage where I have lots of little ones around, that I have to remember that they are individuals. They're not just my herd to be managed, but they're souls to be nurtured. And, just like Cathy said about finding who God made them to be, and for me to remember that as a mom, to draw that out. One thing I really appreciated with my mom was that she did kind of zero in on things that she saw in us, and it wasn't kind of a false pride, but she would speak confidence and encouragement into our lives, and ways that she saw us growing, or when she saw us trying hard at something, and she pulled out that potential. And I just pray that I can do that for my kids, to just encourage them to be equipped to be who God has made them to be. And also, when you mentioned about having fun with our kids, I will never forget my mom teaching my brother chess. And she said, "If you ever beat me, I will get up on our dining room table and I will act like a rooster." And the day that he finally won at chess, I remember walking in from outside, and my mom is strutting around the dining room table. And it's just the fact that she wasn't always taking herself so seriously. And it just gave us this sense that it's fun to be part of our family. It's fun to be enjoying life together. And that's the model now that I want for my own children, that we can, and it's why I chose to homeschool my own children, to say, oh, I know I can't do this perfectly, but I can love them, and I can be here for them, and we can walk this together. I know I can give that to my kids. And so I just encourage you, those who are starting out, You want to give them a great education. Give them yourself. Live what you want them to become, and that's the greatest gift that you can give them.
Thank you, Laura, for that unique perspective. I really appreciate your sharing that. Sarita, if you would for us, please, just offer some final thoughts on what you believe makes a great education.
I just feel like we've just covered so many things, and we're kind of in unison in the things that we're saying, which is really, really pretty awesome. I want to go back to Cathy's comment that the 4 learning styles. I had actually 4 children with 4 different learning styles, and I basically just read to all of them, and all of them have come to love learning. So I think if you just read a lot of things with your kids, they pick up things, and you have all those shared memories, that time together that's so precious that we want to have with our homeschooling kids. And I'm just committed to the fact that if you can raise up kids that love to read, there's no barriers in where they want to go. They can learn, like we've talked about. You can study archery on your own. If you love to read, you can go and research the things that you need to, that you have an interest in, and there's no barriers to where you want to go. I think if we love learning, we'll just continue learning all through life, which is one of those key areas that we want our kids to just strive forward in, learn more, grow and progress, and read books like Laura Lee recommended. And I just think if we have kids that love to learn, they continue to mature and grow and have good conversations one with another all through life. One of the things we pray every morning at Sonlight for the different things in the building, we pray for our homeschooling moms. And one of the things we pray for them regularly is that their students will be prepared for whatever God calls them to do. Because we all have a call in our life, and we all have something God has uniquely created us to do. May it be that our students are prepared for wherever God has led them to go.
Thank you. Sarita, you made the comment that through listening and talking with the 3 of you, you all seem to be pretty united in your perspective and where you're going. And I've got to say, it's encouraging to me. We certainly put planning into this evening's topics and content, but we did not script what you ladies were going to say. We did not, ask you to make sure that your comments and your thoughts lined up. And so I think it's pretty amazing how closely you all seem to have similar answers to the questions from those that have attended and have been offering input and participating. And so I just really appreciate that. And I want to thank you, ladies, for your willingness to set aside time this evening to get together and share your collective wisdom on the topic of what makes a great education. Cathy, it was truly a pleasure to get to know you through this project a little bit and to converse with you this evening. Thank you so much.
It's been great fun. Thank you.
And Laura Lee, it has been tremendous to have the benefit of your perspective in our conversation this evening, and I want to thank you for being part of our panel as well.
This is so much fun. Thank you.
And Sarita, as always, our listeners have benefited from your adding your thoughts and your heart to this conversation tonight, and so I want to thank you as well.
And I want to thank the team for working so hard behind the scenes and handling all the different parts and pieces. Blessings on you all.
Well, Luke, here we are at the end of another Sonlight Live event, drawing it to a close, but I think we have just a wee bit of unfinished business to attend to here.
Absolutely, and the unfinished business is the fun part of this
yes.
stuff. What am I talking about? No, the fun part is all the great answers that are here and all the great information, but on the other hand, there's some really cool prizes out here. So the winners of the last section that we had here are Deborah C. and Tammy H. Deborah from Facebook and Tammy from Twitter. Congratulations, you guys each won a copy of Cathy Duffy's ebook, and then also a summer reader package. So that's really, really cool. And we also have the grand prize winner now. I really should have like a drum roll sound or something, but yeah, I don't have that for you guys. Sorry.
Oh, well.
So the winner of the $250 Sonlight gift certificate is Aaron P. Congratulations, Aaron, winning that $250 Sonlight gift certificate. And for everybody here who participated, we are so grateful for you. For those of you who won, we will be reaching out to you on Facebook and Twitter, messaging you guys to get your information. Again, it will be a private message on Facebook from someone in our team so that we can make certain that we get all of these prizes to you. And as Judy mentioned, yes, you want to check that other folder. We haven't messaged you yet, so if it's not there, that's not because we haven't gotten it to. We just haven't gotten around to that yet because we've been doing this event. It's been awesome. But check that other folder. I remember checking that folder once, and it had been 6 months since somebody had contacted me about something, and I was like, oh, I'm really sorry. So make sure that you check that. That'll be a good thing there. But this isn't it, because we want to thank you guys for joining us, and there is more that is out here, and that is if you want to learn more about homeschooling. For a lot of you, you guys are veterans, you've been doing this, and you just had a few questions about moving on to the next section or things like that. But if you're just beginning, we really recommend that you check out the Homeschool Buyer's Guide at homeschoolbuyersguide.com. And if you want, we just launched this new ebook that we're pretty excited about, and you can get your hands on that at sonlight.com/worthit. One word, so it looks kind of weird, but the URL is on your screen there so that you can see that. You can download one or both or neither, I guess, of those books if you want. So those are out there for everybody who attended here. Go to homeschoolbuyersguide.com or sonlight.com/worthit to get some ebooks as well as all the other cool stuff that we've got going on tonight.
And Luke, I want to also, along with thanking our panelists and thanking you for the opportunity to work together again, I do want to thank all of the folks who listened in, who shared questions and comments, who shared responses to some of the questions that went up. You really are what makes a Sonlight conversation a conversation. And so we thank you for taking time out of your evening, and we look forward to meeting with you again in the future in our ongoing Sonlight Conversations series. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great evening.